The text arrived at 9 in the morning, sharp and cruel. "Don't come to my wedding." I stared at the screen, feeling the familiar sting of rejection settle in my chest. But before I could even type a reply, my phone buzzed again with a frantic fraud alert. It seemed my sister did not want my face at her ceremony, but she desperately wanted the family trust fund I controlled. So, without a word, I logged in and quietly shut everything down. Merriwick was a gray town, the kind of place where the fog rolled off the harbor and stuck to the windows of the brick buildings downtown until noon. It was a town built on old money and new secrets, and I knew where most of the bodies were buried because I knew where the money went. I worked as a financial operations manager for Harborline Title and Escrow. It was not a glamorous job. It was not the kind of career people made movies about. But it was a job that required a specific kind of brain, the kind that noticed when a pattern was broken. I spent my days looking at columns of numbers, scanning closing disclosures, and verifying wire transfers. To most people, a ledger was just a boring list of transactions. To me, it was a narrative. Money moved like water. It flowed downhill. It pooled where it was blocked. And if you watched it long enough, you could see exactly who was drowning. I was 33 years old, single, and arguably the most responsible person in the Garcia family. That title was not an honor. It was a burden that had been strapped to my back since I was 16. The year my father, Gordon, made a series of bad investments that nearly cost us our house. I was the one who learned to balance the checkbook. I was the one who figured out which utility bill could be paid late without the lights getting cut off. And when my grandmother passed away 3 years ago, leaving a modest family trust, she had bypassed my parents entirely and named me the trustee. She had told me, holding my hand with a grip that felt like dry leaves, that I was the only one who wouldn't spend it on magic beans. I took that responsibility seriously. The trust was not a fortune, but it was a safety net. It was meant to ensure my parents had care in their old age, and that my younger sister, Natalie, had a cushion for emergencies. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the first domino fell. I was at my desk, double-checking a title insurance policy for a commercial property on the waterfront, when my phone buzzed against the hard laminate of the desktop. It was a notification from the family group chat. My mother, Diane, had sent a screenshot. It was an Instagram post from Natalie. The image was professional, likely taken by a photographer she could not afford, showing a close-up of her hand resting on a man's bicep. A diamond ring, modest but sparkling, caught the light, but it was the caption that made my stomach turn over. Save the date. 2 weeks to go until forever. See you all at the Larkspur House. I stared at the screen. The Larkspur House. I knew the Larkspur House. Everyone in Merriwick knew it. It was a sprawling Victorian estate on the cliffs overlooking the ocean. A venue where the rental fee alone cost more than my car. It was the kind of place booked by senators' daughters and tech moguls from the city, not by a 26-year-old who drifted between barista gigs and selling handmade jewelry on the internet. My mother followed the screenshot with a flurry of texts. "Isn't it wonderful? I am so relieved she finally posted it. I have been dying to tell everyone." I typed back slowly. 2 weeks? Why is it so soon? And how is she paying for Larkspur? My mother's reply was instant and dismissive. "Oh, Victoria, stop worrying about the math for once. Caleb is taking care of everything. His family is very well off. Just be happy for your sister. Caleb." I had met Caleb Mercer exactly twice. He was handsome in a generic, polished way, with a smile that showed too many teeth and a handshake that felt like he was selling me a used car. He claimed to work in private lending, a term so vague it could mean anything from venture capital to loan sharking. I set the phone down and tried to return to my work, but the unease sat heavy in my gut. 2 weeks was not a wedding timeline. It was a shotgun deadline, and the Larkspur House did not have openings 2 weeks out unless someone canceled or someone paid a premium to bump another couple. The afternoon dragged. The gray fog outside the window deepened into a drizzle. By the time I left the office, the streetlights were haloed in mist. I drove home to my apartment, a sensible 2-bedroom unit near the library, and heated up leftover soup. At 8 o'clock, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a direct text from Natalie. I picked it up, expecting a request for help with logistics, or maybe a demand that I buy a specific dress color. Natalie only contacted me when she needed something. The message was 3 lines long. "Don't come. I don't want you there making it weird. Just stay home." I read it twice. Then I read it a third time. There was no explanation. There was no preamble. Just a neat, clean rejection that sliced deeper than any shouting match we had ever had. I sat on my couch, the phone cold in my hand, making it weird. That was the family code for me asking questions. That was the code for Victoria looking at the price tag. That was the code for Victoria pointing out that the math did not add up. I started to type a reply. "Nat, what are you talking about? Mom just told me—" I deleted it. I typed again. "If this is about the dress code, I deleted that too." The silence in my apartment felt sudden and loud. I had spent 15 years shielding Natalie from consequences. I had paid her rent when she forgot to save for it. I had covered her car insurance when she lost her job. I was the trustee of the fund that was supposed to keep her safe. And now, for the biggest day of her life, I was being told to stay away because my presence was an inconvenience. It hurt. I would not pretend it did not hurt. It felt like a physical blow to the chest, a tightness that made it hard to breathe. But I was Victoria Garcia. I did not cry. I processed. I set the phone down on the coffee table and went to the kitchen to wash my bowl. I was scrubbing a spoon with aggressive precision when the phone lit up again. This time, it was not a text. It was a notification from the banking app I had installed to monitor the Garcia Family Trust. Alert. Suspicious transaction detected. Debit card, ending in 4491. I froze. That was the card I had issued to Natalie 6 months ago. It was a restricted subaccount, meant for small, approved expenses. She had begged for it, claiming she needed a way to pay for wedding deposits without asking me for a check every single time. Against my better judgment, I had agreed, but I had linked it to a specific checking account with a finite balance. I dried my hands on a dish towel and picked up the phone. The alert showed a withdrawal attempt of $500 from an ATM. That was odd. Natalie usually used the card for point-of-sale purchases. Florists, caterers, dress shops, cash withdrawals were rare. Then another alert popped up. Transaction approved, $300, then another. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. I frowned. I unlocked the app and logged into the administrative dashboard. The interface was clean, blue and white, a comforting grid of order in a chaotic night. I clicked on the sub-account history. My breath hitched. The account was empty. It had held $5,000 as of this morning. Now, the balance was 0.00. I scrolled down the transaction list. It was a hemorrhage. $700, withdrawal. $800, withdrawal. $950, withdrawal. The timestamps were all from the last 3 hours. Someone was draining the account in chunks. I immediately dialed Natalie's number. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then clicked over. "Hey, it's Nat. I'm probably living my best life, so leave a message." "Natalie," I said to the recording, keeping my voice steady. "Call me back. Immediately. There is activity on the trust card that looks like fraud." I hung up and stared at the screen. Something about the numbers bothered me. $950, $800. Why not take the daily maximum all at once? I called my parents' landline. They were old-fashioned. They still sat in the living room and watched the 10 o'clock news. My mother answered on the second ring. "Victoria? I told you. Stop worrying about the wedding." "We are handling it." "I am not calling about the wedding invite, Mom," I said, cutting straight through her defensive tone. "I am calling because the trust account Natalie has access to has been drained. I need to know if she is with you." There was a pause on the other end, a long, heavy pause. I heard my father mumbling something in the background. "She is not here," my mother said, her voice tight. "She is busy. It is wedding stress." "Victoria, do not start with your interrogations tonight." "Mom, this isn't an interrogation. $5,000 disappeared in 3 hours. If Natalie didn't do it, her card has been stolen. She is fine, Diane snapped. It was the sharpness of a cornered animal. She needed to pay a vendor who only takes cash. The DJ, I think, or the lighting people. You know how these creative types are. Just let it go. A vendor who takes $5,000 in cash at 9 at night? I asked. Mom, that is not how business works. You always do this, my mother said. You always have to find the problem. Just stop. We will talk about it after the wedding. She hung up. I stood there, listening to the dial tone disconnect. After the wedding, that phrase hung in the air like a threat. I did not sleep well that night. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows of the rain on the plaster. My sister did not want me at her wedding, but she was spending the money I managed to pay for it. My parents were lying to me, and somewhere, money was moving in ways that felt wrong. The next morning, I went to work early. The office was quiet, the smell of industrial carpet cleaner still sharp in the air. I made a pot of coffee, black, and sat down at my dual monitor setup. I logged into the bank portal again, but this time I did not look at the mobile app. I pulled up the full desktop ledger, the one that showed metadata. I exported the last 6 months of transactions for the entire trust, not just Natalie's subaccount. The Garcia family trust was not huge. It held the proceeds from the sale of my grandmother's house and some life insurance money. It was meant to last for 20 years. As I scrolled through the data, I felt a cold prickle of recognition on the back of my neck. It was the feeling I got when a closing disclosure didn't balance, when the numbers were trying to tell a lie. I saw the withdrawals from last night, but then I looked back further, 2 weeks ago. $9,900, transferred from the main savings to the wedding subaccount. 3 weeks ago, $9,500, transferred. 4 weeks ago, $9,800, transferred. I stopped breathing for a second. In the banking world, there is a number that triggers automatic federal reporting, $10,000. Any cash transaction or movement over $10,000 generates a currency transaction report, or CTR, which is sent to the Treasury Department to prevent money laundering. Structuring, breaking down large sums into smaller amounts to avoid that reporting threshold, is a federal crime. These withdrawals were not random expenses. They were structured. Someone was moving money out of the trust, deliberately keeping each chunk under the radar. I looked at the notes attached to the internal transfers: venue deposit, catering advance, floral retainer, but the amounts were too round. Catering bills were never exactly $9,500. They were $4,322.50. Real life had sense. Real life had tax. This was not spending. This was extraction. I sat back in my ergonomic chair, the coffee turning cold in my mug. If I did nothing, I was complicit. I was the trustee. My name was on the master signature card. If the IRS or the bank auditors flagged this, they would not look at Natalie, the unemployed barista. They would look at Victoria Garcia, the financial operations manager who should have known better. My mother's voice echoed in my head. Don't start. I picked up my desk phone and dialed a number I knew by heart, though I rarely used it for personal matters. Wren and Sato Legal Services, a receptionist answered. Hi, this is Victoria Garcia. Is Mara in? Mara Wren was a shark in a silk blouse. We had worked together on several complicated estate closures at Harborline. She owed me a favor for untangling a messy lien on a property last year. Victoria, Mara said a moment later, her voice crisp. To what do I owe the pleasure? Please tell me you are not calling about the Henderson file. No, I said. I need to ask a hypothetical question about trustee liability. Hypotheticals are my favorite, Mara said. Shoot. If a trustee notices a pattern of withdrawals from a beneficiary that looks like structuring, keeping amounts just under the $10,000 reporting limit, and the trustee suspects the invoices justifying those withdrawals might be inflated or fabricated, what is the trustee's obligation? There was a silence on the line. The playful tone vanished from Mara's voice. Victoria, she said slowly, If the trustee sees that and does nothing, the trustee is potentially liable for breach of fiduciary duty, and if the money is being used for anything illegal, the trustee could be named as an accessory to money laundering or fraud. Ignorance is not a defense when you are the one holding the keys. My stomach dropped. That is what I thought. Is this hypothetical? Mara asked sharply. I need to verify some things, I said. But thank you, Mara. Victoria, she warned. If you see smoke, do not just close the window. Put out the fire. If you allow the trust to be drained, you can be sued by the other beneficiaries, or worse. Who would sue me? I asked. My parents are the only other beneficiaries besides my sister. If the money runs out and your parents need care later, Mara said, the state could sue you to recover assets before they pay for Medicaid, or if the sister is involved in something criminal, the government freezes everything. Protect yourself. Document everything. I hung up. I looked at the two monitors. On the left, the email from my sister telling me to stay away. On the right, the ledger showing the systematic looting of my grandmother's legacy. They wanted me gone. They wanted me to be the silent bank, the invisible hand that signed the checks and asked no questions. They relied on my guilt, on my deep-seated need to be the good daughter, the one who fixed things. But I was not just a daughter, I was a professional, and I was done being the victim. I opened the administrative control panel for the trust. My hands did not shake. This was what I did every day. I managed risk. I stopped losses. I navigated to the sub-account Natalie used. Status, active. I clicked the drop-down menu. Change status. I selected frozen, suspected fraud. A dialog box popped up asking for confirmation. Are you sure you want to freeze this account? All associated cards will be declined immediately. I clicked yes. Then I went to the scheduled transfers. There was another $10,000 pending for Friday, broken into 2 payments of $5,000 each, labeled Honeymoon Fund. I selected them both. Cancel. Finally, I went to the user access panel. Natalie had a login that allowed her to view the balance and initiate transfer requests. I clicked Revoke Access. It took less than 2 minutes. The digital flow of money that had been bleeding the trust dry was severed. I did not send a warning email. I did not call my mother to explain. I simply did my job. I closed the browser window and went back to my title insurance work. The day passed in a blur of routine. I processed 3 files. I attended a staff meeting about the new coffee machine. I ate a sandwich at my desk. I left work at 5:30. The rain had stopped, but the air was cold and damp. I was driving past the library when my phone exploded. It started with a buzz, then another, then a continuous vibration that rattled against the cup holder in my sedan. I pulled over into a parking spot and picked it up. There were 5 missed calls from Natalie, 3 from my mother, 2 from my father, and 1 text message from Natalie, sent 1 minute ago. I opened it. The text was in all caps. What did you do? My card was declined at the florist. I look like an idiot. The app says access denied. Fix it now. I read the words, and for the first time in 24 hours, the crushing weight in my chest lightened. If this was just about a wedding, she would have asked why the card didn't work. She would have been confused. But she wasn't confused. She was panicked. Fix it now. That was not the reaction of a bride whose credit card glitched. That was the reaction of someone who had made a promise to pay someone dangerous, and suddenly found their pockets empty. I looked at the phone, at the angry, glowing letters. I did not reply. I put the car in gear and drove home. The wedding was in 2 weeks. They had told me not to come, but now I knew I had to go. Because whatever was happening at the Larkspur house, it was not a wedding. It was a deadline, and I had just paused the clock. I arrived at my apartment building and parked in my assigned spot. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, sharp clarity. My sister thought she could cut me out of the picture while keeping her hand in my pocket. She thought I was just the boring, responsible sister who would cry in her apartment and sign the checks. She was wrong. I walked up the stairs to my door, my heels clicking on the concrete. I unlocked the deadbolt and stepped inside, locking it firmly behind me. I went to my home computer. A robust desktop I used for gaming and side projects. I booted it up. I opened a blank document and typed a header. Incident log. Garcia Trust. Date: October 14th. Action: accounts frozen. I was not going to fix it. I was going to watch what happened next. My phone rang again. It was my mother. I let it ring. The silence in the apartment was no longer lonely. It was strategic. I changed out of my work clothes into sweatpants and a t-shirt. I made a cup of tea. I sat by the window and watched the street below. A car drove by, its headlights sweeping across the wet pavement. Then, another text came through. This one was different. It was not from Natalie or my parents. It was an automated alert from the bank's fraud department, sent to my email. Alert: multiple failed login attempts for user ID, N. Garcia, IP address location traced to Rest Stop 44, Interstate 95. I frowned. Interstate 95 was the main highway running south out of the state. Rest Stop 44 was an hour away, in the middle of nowhere. Why was my sister trying to log into the bank account from a highway rest stop an hour outside of town, when she was supposed to be meeting with a florist in Merriwick? I sipped my tea. The wedding was a theater, the dress, the venue, the save the date posts. It was all a show. But the money? The money was real, and someone was desperate to get it out before the curtain fell. I opened a new tab on my browser and typed in a search. Avery Finch Events, LLC. It was the name attached to one of the vendor invoices I had seen in the ledger earlier that day. A payment of $4,000 for consulting. The search results came up. No website found. Registration date: 3 weeks ago. Registered agent. Legal Zoom. It was a shell company. I leaned back in my chair. Okay, Natalie, I whispered to the empty room. You don't want me at the wedding? Fine. I took another sip of tea. But I'm definitely checking the books. The phone buzzed again. Natalie, Victoria, pick up the phone. Caleb is freaking out. You don't understand what you're doing. I smiled. A thin, humorless curve of my lips. Oh, I think I do, I said softly. I turned off the phone. The office of Wren and Sato Legal Services smelled of lemon polish and old paper. It was a clean, sharp scent that usually calmed me, but today it made the bile rise in my throat. I sat in a leather chair that was slightly too large for me, clutching a manila folder so tightly my knuckles had turned white. Mara Wren sat across from me. She was a woman who wore her intelligence like armor. Her glasses were thick-framed, her blazer was impeccably tailored, and she did not smile when she read the printouts I had slid across her mahogany desk. She read in silence for 5 minutes. The only sound in the room was the ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner and the occasional scratch of her pen as she circled something on the ledger. Finally, she looked up. You did the right thing freezing the account, she said. Her voice was low, professional, devoid of the sympathy I had half hoped for. But you need to understand the position you are in. Victoria, you are the trustee. You hold the keys. If the house burns down, the fire marshal does not look for the person who lit the match. They look for the person who turned off the smoke detectors. I did not turn them off, I said. I am the one ringing the alarm. To me, yes, Mara said. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. But to a forensic auditor? To a judge? You are the one with the administrative login. You are the one who approved the initial setup of the sub-account. If this money is gone, and if it was used for something illicit, the narrative is very easy to construct. The jealous sister, the trustee with access, the financial manager who knows how to structure withdrawals to avoid federal reporting. I felt a cold chill slide down my spine. You think they would frame me? I think people do desperate things when money is involved, Mara said. And I think your sister is spending money she does not have, with a fiancé whose job description is suspicious at best. You need to stop thinking like a sister and start thinking like a defendant. She pushed the papers back toward me. Document everything, she commanded. Do not have a single conversation with your sister or your parents over the phone unless you can record it, which you cannot do legally without consent in this state. Keep it to email, Keep it to text. Get a paper trail. And demand the contracts. The contracts? The vendor contracts, Mara said. If she is withdrawing $9,000 for a caterer, there is a contract. If she is paying a venue, there is an invoice. Demand them. If she refuses to produce them, you have your justification for keeping the funds frozen. If she produces them, we verify them, but do not release a single cent until you have a document in your hand that you have independently verified. I nodded, feeling the weight of the task settling onto my shoulders. It was not just a family squabble anymore. It was a cold war. And Victoria, Mara added as I stood to leave, watch your credit. If they are willing to burn the trust, they might not stop there. I drove back to my apartment with the radio off. The silence of the car felt safer than the noise of the world. When I got home, I went straight to my computer. I did not make coffee. I did not change out of my work clothes. I sat down and drafted an email to Natalie. I kept it clinical, stripping away every ounce of emotion. I did not ask why she disinvited me. I did not ask why she was hurting me. I simply wrote as the trustee. Natalie, as of this morning, the sub-account associated with the Garcia Family Trust has been suspended due to irregular activity. To resolve this and review the status of the funds, I require copies of all executed contracts and invoices for the expenses you are attempting to pay. Specifically, I need the agreements for the venue, the caterer, and the company listed as Ivory Finch Events. Once these are received and verified, we can discuss the release of funds. Victoria. I hit send. Then I waited. I expected a phone call. I expected a screaming voicemail. Natalie was volatile. She operated on high bursts of emotion. When she was cornered, she lashed out, but the phone did not ring. 2 hours passed. I made a sandwich I did not eat. I paced the length of my living room. Then, my computer dinged. A reply. I sat down and opened it. The subject line read, Fiduciary duty, and immediate disbursement. I frowned. That did not sound like Natalie. Natalie used subject lines like urgent or please read, or just a string of exclamation points. I began to read the body of the email. Victoria, I am in receipt of your unauthorized suspension of the agreed-upon assets. Please be advised that your actions constitute an undue burden on the beneficiaries and a potential breach of your fiduciary obligations as outlined in the trust instrument. The requests for proprietary vendor agreements are outside the scope of your administrative role. As the funds were pre-allocated for discretionary use, we require the immediate unfreezing of the sub-account to avoid material damages to the scheduled event. Failure to rectify this by close of business tomorrow will force us to seek alternative remedies. Natalie. I stared at the screen. Material damages. Alternative remedies. Scope of your administrative role. Natalie had dropped out of community college twice. She once asked me if a tax refund was free money from the government. She did not write this email. Someone else had written it, someone who knew legal terminology, or at least knew enough to sound intimidating. Caleb, or perhaps Caleb's family. The realization made my skin crawl. They were handling her. They were ghostwriting her communications to her own sister. I was about to forward the email to Mara when a heavy pounding shook my front door. I jumped, my heart hammering against my ribs. It was not a polite knock. It was a demand. I walked to the door and looked through the peephole. My mother, Diane, stood in the hallway. Her face was flushed, her hair slightly disheveled. Behind her stood my father, Gordon. He looked smaller than I remembered, his shoulders hunched inside his beige windbreaker. I unlocked the deadbolt and opened the door. "Mom," I said. "Dad, what are you doing here?" Diane pushed past me without an invitation. She carried a scent of nervous sweat and expensive perfume. "You have to stop this," she said, her voice high and brittle. "Right now. Victoria, you have to stop this madness." Gordon followed her in, closing the door softly behind him. He would not meet my eyes. "I am not doing anything," I said, staying near the entrance. "I am doing my job. Did you see the withdrawal history? Did you see how fast the money was moving?" "It is a wedding!" Diane shouted. She spun around in the middle of my living room, her hands flying up. Weddings are expensive, you know that. Why are you trying to ruin this for her? Is it because you are jealous? Is it because you are 33 and alone, and she is marrying into a family with real status? The words were designed to hurt. My mother knew exactly where my armor was thinnest. But tonight, the insult just bounced off. I was too focused on the fear in her eyes. This is not about jealousy, I said calmly. It is about fraud. Natalie sent me an email 10 minutes ago that she did not write. Who is writing her emails? Mom? Is it Caleb? Caleb is a businessman, Diane said. He understands how these things work. He is just trying to protect Natalie from your bureaucratic bullying. He is trying to get cash out of a trust fund, I said. And I want to know why. They are sensitive, Diane hissed. She stepped closer to me, lowering her voice. The Mercer family, they are very private. They are sensitive about appearances. If checks start bouncing, if cards get declined, it looks bad. It looks like we are destitute. You are embarrassing us. Victoria, you are making us look like trash in front of people who could change our lives. Change our lives? I looked at my father. Dad, what does that mean? Gordon looked up. His face was gray. He looked like a man who had not slept in a week. Just unlock the money, Tori, he said softly, using his old nickname for me. Please, it will all be replaced. After the wedding, it all gets reset. What gets reset? I asked. The arrangements, he mumbled. Diane interrupted him, pulling a folded sheet of paper from her purse. Look, we brought this to show you we are serious. She slapped the paper onto my dining table. I walked over and looked down. It was a document titled Family Reimbursement Agreement. It was a generic legal form, likely downloaded from the internet. It stated that Gordon and Diane Garcia agreed to indemnify the trust for any funds used for the wedding of Natalie Garcia. But the amount line was blank, and the date line was blank. At the bottom, my father's signature was already scrawled in blue ink. The signature was shaky, trailing off at the end as if his hand had given out. I looked at the paper, then at my father. You signed a blank check, I said. Dad, you signed an indemnity agreement with no amount. Do you have any idea what this means? If Natalie spends $50,000, you are liable for it. Do you have $50,000? It is a formality, Diane insisted. To shut you up. Gordon, tell her. Gordon's hands were trembling at his sides. He put them in his pockets. Diane said it was the only way, he whispered. The only way to what? I asked. To get Caleb to marry her? To keep the peace, Diane shrieked. Just unfreeze the account. Victoria, do it now. Or so help me God. I will never forgive you. I looked at them, my mother, manic and desperate, willing to sell our financial future for a wedding photo. My father, broken and compliant, signing away his safety because he was too tired to fight. No, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. What? Diane whispered. No, I repeated. I will not unfreeze it, not until I see the contracts, not until I know where the money is really going, and if you come here again screaming at me, I will call the police. Diane stared at me with pure hatred. It was a look I had never seen on her face before. It was not the look of a mother disappointed in a daughter. It was the look of an enemy assessing a threat. You are a cold, bitter girl, she spat. Come on, Gordon. She marched to the door. Gordon lingered for a second. He looked at me, and his eyes were wet. I am sorry, Tori, he whispered. Dad, I said, what did you do? What else did you sign? We just want her to be happy, he said. It sounded like a line he had repeated to himself 1,000 times. Then he turned and followed my mother out into the hallway. I locked the door behind them. My hands were shaking now. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door and breathed. They are deeper in this than they admit. Mara's warning came back to me. Watch your credit. If my father was signing blank legal documents, What else had they done? I went back to my computer. The email from Natalie was still on the screen. I minimized it. I opened a new browser window and navigated to the annual credit report site. I had checked my credit 6 months ago, and everything had been fine. I requested the report for TransUnion. I answered the security questions, my first car, my high school mascot, the report generated. I scanned the summary, total open accounts, 6. I only had 3 credit cards and a student loan. That should be 4. I scrolled down to the new accounts section. My heart stopped. There was a new credit card opened 3 weeks ago. Store card, Home Depot. Limit, $5,000. Current balance, $4,800. And below that, a business checking inquiry. Small business checking. Avery Finch Events, LLC. Guarantor, Victoria Garcia. I felt the blood drain from my face. They had used my name. They had used my old address, my parents' house, as the billing address, which was why I hadn't seen the statements. Avery Finch Events, LLC. That was the vendor Natalie was paying. I had assumed it was a shell company created by the wedding planner, but it wasn't just a shell company. It was a business account opened in my name. Without my permission, I was paying myself. Or rather, the trust was paying an entity that I legally owned on paper, but had no control over. If the trust was defrauded, and the money went to Avery Finch Events, and I was the guarantor of Avery Finch Events, I was stealing from myself. It was a perfect frame job. I grabbed a notepad and a pen. I needed to trace this. I searched the state business registry for Avery Finch Events, LLC again. This time, I looked at the filing documents I had missed earlier. Registered agent. Legal Zoom. Manager. Caleb Mercer. Caleb was the manager. I was the guarantor. So, I carried the liability, and he controlled the operations. I looked at the transaction history for the trust again. The payments to Avery Finch were listed as consulting services. I searched for the business address listed on the credit report. It was a P.O. box in a strip mall on the other side of Merriwick. But the payments? Where did the money go once it hit the Avery Finch account? I couldn't see inside the Avery Finch account because I didn't have the login, but I could see the pattern. I went back to the trust ledger. I looked at the ATM withdrawals. The automated alert from earlier had said, Rest Stop 44. I pulled up a map. Rest Stop 44 was on the southbound highway. It was nowhere near the P.O. box. It was nowhere near the Larkspur house. Why go there? I zoomed out on the map. The rest stop was exactly halfway between Merriwick and the state capital, and it was also on the route to the airport. I picked up my phone. I needed to call the bank, not the automated line. I needed the fraud department. It was 8:30 at night, but the fraud unit operated 24/7. I dialed the number on the back of my own debit card. Fraud prevention, a tired voice answered. My name is Victoria Garcia. I am the trustee for the Garcia Family Trust. I need to report identity theft that is directly linked to the trust account. I spent 40 minutes on the phone. I explained the credit card I hadn't opened. I explained the LLC. I gave them the timestamps of the ATM withdrawals. Ma'am, the investigator said, his tone sharpening as I laid out the timeline. You said the withdrawals were structured? Just under reporting limits? Yes, $900. $800. And the ATM used, you said Rest Stop 44? Yes. Hold on. I heard typing. We have had a series of skimmers found at highway rest stops. But this sounds different. If the card was used with a PIN, it wasn't skimmed. Someone had the card. My sister had the card, I said. But she is supposed to be in Merriwick. We can pull the camera footage, the investigator said. It will take 48 hours to get the file from the vendor, but we can tag it. If you are claiming you did not authorize these accounts, we can freeze everything linked to your social security number. Do it, I said. Freeze it all. The trust, the fake LLC, the credit card. I want it all locked down. Okay, it is done. No money moves in or out as of right now. Thank you. I hung up. I felt a strange, vibrating energy in my limbs. It was rage, distilled into action. I had stopped the bleeding, but I still didn't know the endgame. Why the rush? Why the blank documents? Why the fake company in my name? My phone rang again. I looked at the screen. It was Natalie. I hesitated. Mara had said document everything. I hit record on my external voice recorder, a device I used for work meetings, and set the phone on speaker. Hello? Victoria? Natalie sounded different. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't speaking in legal jargon. She was crying. It was a wet, ragged sound, the sound of a child who had scraped their knee. Nat, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Why are you doing this to me? She sobbed. Why do you hate me so much? I don't hate you, Natalie. You do. You have always hated that I was the favorite. You have always been jealous that things come easy for me, and you have to work for everything. I know it. Mom says it all the time. Is that what Mom says? She says you are punishing me, Natalie cried, because I found love and you didn't. Because I am getting the Larkspur house and you live in that sad apartment. Is that it? You want to teach me a lesson? I am trying to stop you from committing a felony, I said. Do you know there is a business account opened in my name for your wedding planner? Natalie hiccuped. The sobbing paused for a split second, then resumed. I don't know anything about that. Caleb handles the business stuff. I just wanted a wedding. I just wanted one day where I felt like a princess. Is that so wrong? Just this once. Tori, just this once. Let me have something. Please, just unfreeze it. There is barely anything left anyway. I softened. Despite everything, the insults, the theft, the lies, she was my little sister. I remembered braiding her hair. I remembered buying her ice cream when she failed her driving test. Natalie, I said gently, I can't. It's not about the wedding anymore. It's about… Please, she begged. Just release the last transfer. I promise I won't ask for anything else. I know there is only $14,210 left in the main holding. Just give me that, and I will leave you alone forever. I froze. My hand hovered over the recorder. What did you say? I asked. I said just give me the rest. She wept. The 14,000. No, I said slowly. You said $14,210. So? Natalie, I said, my voice turning to ice. The user dashboard you have access to only shows the sub-account balance, which is 0. The main holding balance is only visible to the trustee. The sobbing stopped instantly. The silence on the line was deafening. How do you know the exact balance of the main trust account down to the $10 increment? I asked. Mom told me, she stammered. Mom doesn't have access either, I said. Only I have the login. Unless they had been reading my mail, or guessing my passwords. Or unless my mother had been looking over my shoulder years ago and wrote something down. You have been in the main account, I said. You or Caleb? I have to go, Natalie said. Her voice was suddenly dry, sharp. The crying was gone. Natalie, if you log in again… Click. She hung up. I sat there, staring at the recorder. She knew the number. That meant this wasn't just about draining her allowance. They had been monitoring the entire pot. They knew exactly how much was there to steal. And if she knew the specific number, it meant she had checked it recently. Today, I looked at the time. It was 9:15. I grabbed my keys. I needed to see the bank footage. I couldn't wait 48 hours, but I couldn't get it myself. I needed to go to the one place I had avoided all day. I needed to go to the police station. But as I stood up, I realized something. If Natalie knew the balance of the main account, she knew that freezing the sub-account didn't stop the main wire transfers if she had the routing number. I scrambled back to the computer. I logged in. Pending transaction. Wire transfer. 14,210. Recipient. Crown Spire Holdings. Status. Processing. They had initiated a wire transfer from the main account while she was on the phone with me, the crying. It was a distraction. She was keeping me talking while someone else hit the button. I clicked cancel. Error. Transaction in process. Cannot cancel. No, I hissed. I dialed the fraud number again. Pick up. Pick up. Pick up. Fraud prevention. This is Victoria Garcia again. Stop the wire. There is a wire for $14,000 going to Crown Spire Holdings. Stop it now. Ma'am, please calm down. Let me pull up the file. There is no time to calm down. They are emptying the account right now. Okay, I see the request. It was initiated via telephone banking at 9:12 p.m. 3 minutes ago, while Natalie was sobbing about being a princess. It is fraudulent, I said. I am the trustee. I did not authorize it. Okay, I am placing a stop payment. It might take a few hours to reflect, but if it just went out, we can usually claw it back. Claw it back, I repeated. Do whatever you have to do. I slumped back in my chair. They were not just desperate, they were coordinated. Natalie distracts, Caleb executes, and the destination? Crown Spire Holdings. Ivory Finch was the shell. Crown Spire was the vault. I looked at the screen. The balance hovered there, grayed out. I had saved it. Barely. But now, I knew the truth. My sister wasn't a victim of a bad fiancé. She was an accomplice. I saved the audio file from the recorder to my hard drive. Then I emailed a copy to Mara Wren. Subject: evidence of collusion. I was done protecting them. The digital silence after I stopped the wire transfer was heavy, but it was not empty. It was the kind of silence that precedes a detonation. I sat in the blue glow of my monitors, the hum of the hard drive the only sound in the room, and I asked myself the question that had been nagging at me since Natalie recited the exact balance of the main trust account. How did she know? Natalie was not a detail-oriented person. She was a person of broad strokes and grand gestures. She never balanced a checkbook in her life. Yet, she knew the figure, $14,210, down to the $10 increment. I opened my email client again. I did not look at my current inbox. I went to the archives. I had shared an administrative email account with my mother years ago. Back when my father had his first health scare, and we needed a central place for medical bills. I hadn't used it in 5 years, but the password was likely the same. My mother never changed passwords. She thought it was unnecessarily complicated work. I typed in the address. I typed in the password. Gordon 1985. It unlocked. I felt a pang of guilt, quickly followed by a wave of nausea as the inbox loaded. I searched for the keyword, trust. The results filled the screen. Subject: FWD. Monthly statement. Garcia Trust. From Diane Garcia. To Natalie Garcia. Date: September 12th. Subject: FWD. Quarterly performance review. From Diane Garcia. To Natalie Garcia. Date: August 1st. Subject: FWD. Account balance alert. From Diane Garcia. To Caleb Mercer. Date: July 15th. I clicked on the last one. My mother had forwarded an automated balance alert to Caleb. The body of the email contained only one line of text from her. See? The liquidity is there. We just need Victoria to sign off. My hands went cold. This had been going on for months. Every time I received a statement, my mother, who insisted on getting paper copies for the files, had been scanning them and emailing them to my sister and her fiancé. They weren't just guessing. They had a map. I was the guard walking the perimeter, checking the locks. While the people inside were handing blueprints to the thieves, I closed the browser. I needed air. I needed to be somewhere that didn't smell like betrayal and stale tea. I slept fitfully, waking up every hour to check my phone, expecting another attack, but the night remained quiet. The real noise began the next morning. I took a personal day from Harborline. I couldn't focus on title insurance when my own family was engaged in financial warfare. Instead, I drove to a diner on the edge of Marrowick, a place with vinyl booths and coffee that tasted like burnt hazelnuts. I was meeting someone. After the conversation with the fraud unit the night before, I had reached out to a contact Mara Wren had given me. His name was Elias Thorne, and he was a senior investigator for Red Grove Mutual Bank. Red Grove was not our bank, but they were the regional clearinghouse for many of the large wire transfers in the area. Elias was a man who looked like he had seen every variety of human greed. He wore a gray suit that had seen better days and had the weary eyes of a priest who no longer believed in redemption. He slid into the booth opposite me without a handshake. "Ms. Garcia," he said, "Mara says you are smart. She says you caught a structuring scheme in progress." "I caught my sister draining a trust fund," I said, wrapping my hands around a warm mug. "And I caught a wire transfer going to a company called Crown Spire Holdings. Do you know them?" Elias didn't blink. He pulled a small notebook from his pocket. "Crown Spire," he said, flipping a page. "They are a ghost. They pop up in property records, usually as the second or third lien holder on distressed assets. They buy debt. They factor invoices. And lately, they have been linked to a few high-value bridge loans that went sour." "Bridge loans?" "Short-term, high-interest lending," Elias explained. "The kind of money you borrow when the bank says no and you need cash by Friday or your legs get broken." He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Your sister's fiancé, Caleb Mercer. What does he do?" "He says he is in private lending," I said. "Sometimes he says investment consulting. Sometimes it is property flipping. It is always vague." Elias nodded, as if checking a box on a form. "Private lending is a polite term for using other people's money to pay off yesterday's bad bets. If he is connected to Crown Spire, he isn't the lender, Ms. Garcia. He is the borrower, or the runner." "The runner?" "The guy who fetches the cash," Elias said. "We see this pattern. We call it a wedding front." I frowned. "A wedding front?" "Weddings are the perfect cover for moving large sums of money quickly," Elias said, leaning in. "Nobody questions a $20,000 wire transfer to a venue or a caterer. Parents write checks. Grandmothers empty savings accounts. It is emotional money. It bypasses the usual logic filters. If you owe a shark $50,000, you don't pay him directly. You set up a fake wedding. You create a fake vendor, like, say, Avery Finch events, and you have your family pour money into it. Then, the vendor pays the shark. The wedding happens, or it doesn't. And the money is gone, washed clean." I felt the blood drain from my face. "So the wedding isn't real?" "The ceremony might be real," Elias said. "The dress might be real, but the function of the event isn't matrimony. It is a deadline. The date of the wedding is likely the date the loan comes due. That is why they are panicking. That is why they are trying to break down the doors to get the cash. If they don't pay by the time the vows are exchanged, the consequences won't be a bad reception. They will be physical or legal." I sat back against the vinyl seat. "My parents," I whispered. "They signed a blank reimbursement agreement." "Then they are the collateral," Elias said flatly. "If the trust money doesn't cover the debt, the creditors will come for whatever your parents signed over." I paid for the coffee. I left Elias with a copy of the Avery Finch credit report I had pulled. "Be careful, Ms. Garcia," he said as I stood up. "If this is Crown Spire, these are not nice people. They are efficient, and they do not like it when the ATM stops dispensing cash." I drove back into town, my mind racing. A deadline. The wedding was a deadline. That explained the rush. That explained the 2 weeks' notice. That explained the desperation. My phone buzzed in the cup holder. It was a text from my Aunt Linda. "Victoria, I just heard from your mother. I can't believe you would be so petty. Jealousy is a sin. Honey, let your sister have her day. Unblock the funds." I stared at the message. Aunt Linda hadn't texted me in 3 years. Then another arrived. This one from my cousin Mike. "Hey, Tori. Heard you're trying to ruin the wedding because you're lonely. Not cool. Mom is crying. Fix it." And another from my godmother. "Susan. Victoria. Money destroys families. Don't let your bitterness over being single destroy Natalie's happiness. The happiest day of her life shouldn't be about your ego." I pulled over to the side of the road. My hands were shaking. The phrasing, jealousy, bitterness, happiest day, ruining it. It was coordinated. Diane had launched a campaign. She had called everyone in the family tree, spun a story about the cruel, controlling older sister who was withholding money out of spite, and weaponized them against me. She knew I hated conflict. She knew I valued my reputation as the responsible one. She was betting that if enough people called me petty, I would cave just to make the noise stop. I didn't reply to any of them. I put the phone in the glove box. I needed to know how deep the rot went. Elias had said, "They are the collateral." I drove to the county recorder's office. It was a brick building next to the courthouse. As a title manager, I spent half my life in these archives. I knew the clerks by name. "Hey, Sarah," I said to the woman at the front desk. "I need to pull the deed and lien history for a residential property, 550 Elm Street. My parents' house, the house I grew up in, the house that was supposed to be paid off in 3 years." Sarah typed into her terminal. "Sure thing. Victoria, one sec." The printer whirred. She handed me the document. "Looks like there was a new filing last week," Sarah said cheerfully. "Your folks doing a remodel?" I looked at the paper. Deed of trust. Grantor. Gordon Garcia and Diane Garcia. Grantee. Apex Capital Partners. Amount. $65,000. Date. October 1st. It was a home equity loan. A massive one. Apex Capital Partners. I didn't recognize the name. But the address was a P.O. box in Delaware. I looked at the date. October 1st. 2 weeks ago. Where did that money go? If they took out $65,000, why were they draining the trust for wedding expenses? $65,000 was enough for 2 weddings at the Larkspur house, unless the money never stayed in their account. I walked out of the recorder's office and sat on a bench in the damp autumn air. I called my father. He didn't answer. I called him again. No answer. I knew where he would be. On Wednesdays. He played cards at the senior center, but he always stopped at the hardware store on Main Street just to walk the aisles. It was his safe space. I drove to the hardware store. I found him in the fastener aisle, staring at a box of galvanized screws. He looked older than he had 2 days ago. His skin was papery, his eyes rimmed with red. "Dad," I said softly. He flinched. He dropped the box of screws. They scattered across the linoleum floor with a sound like falling rain. "Tori," he breathed, "you shouldn't be here. Your mother." "I don't care about Mom right now," I said, crouching down to help him pick up the screws. "Dad." I went to the recorder's office. I saw the lien. His hand froze midair. "You took out $65,000 against the house," I said. "Where is it, Dad?" He didn't look at me. He stared at the metal screw in his palm. "It's an investment," he whispered. "Caleb, he had an opportunity. A bridge loan. Guaranteed 20% return in 30 days. He said if we put the money in now, by the wedding it would be back, plus profit. It was supposed to pay for the honeymoon. And the roof? We need a new roof." I closed my eyes. It was the classic pitch. High yield, short term, 0 risk. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "Did you give the money to Caleb directly?" "No," Gordon said. "He set up an account for us, a wedding savings account. He said it was better for tax purposes to mix it with the trust distribution. He said it makes the capital gains look like a gift." My stomach dropped through the floor. The wedding savings account, the one I had closed yesterday, the one I thought only contained the trust money Natalie had been siphoning off. "Dad," I said, "what account number did you deposit the check into?" He recited the last 4 digits, 1189. I stood up, feeling dizzy. That was the account linked to the trust debit card, the one I had frozen, the one I had emptied and moved the funds into a holding escrow to protect them. I hadn't just frozen Natalie's allowance. I had frozen my parents' $65,000. That was why they were frantic. That was why Diane was screaming. It wasn't just about the flowers or the DJ. They had handed their life savings, their home equity, over to Caleb's scheme, and I had locked the door before Caleb could move it out. "Caleb said," Gordon's voice cracked, "he said the money is stuck. He said if we don't get it released by Friday, the deal collapses, and we lose the principal, all of it. There is no deal. Dad," I said gently. There is no 20% return. Caleb is using that money to pay off someone else. If I release that money, it's gone forever. You don't know that, Gordon snapped, a flash of Diane's anger appearing in his eyes. You always think the worst. Caleb is a good boy. He loves Natalie. He is using her, I said. And he is using you. Your mother says you are doing this to hurt us, Gordon said. Standing up, he looked small and defeated. She says you want us to lose the house so we have to move in with you, so you can control us. The accusation was so absurd, so twisted, that it stole my breath. Is that what you think? I asked. Gordon looked at me, his eyes filling with tears. I don't know what to think. Tori, I just know that if that money doesn't move by Friday, we are ruined. Please, just fix it. He turned and walked away, leaving the box of screws on the floor. I watched him go. My heart was breaking, but my resolve was hardening into something like steel. They were hostages. My parents were hostages to a lie they had bought into, and now they were fighting to protect the very thing that was killing them. I went back to my car. I had one more stop. The invoice. I needed proof. Not theories, not patterns. I needed a smoking gun that I could put in front of a judge or a police officer. I had requested copies of the vendor contracts from Natalie. She hadn't sent them, but I remembered seeing a charge on the ledger 2 weeks ago. Blue Sky Catering, $400. It was a massive charge. $18,400 for food? For a wedding that was supposedly small? I pulled up the transaction details on my phone. There was an invoice number attached to the digital receipt, INV 2099A. I searched for Blue Sky Catering. They were a real company, based in the next town over. I called them. Blue Sky Catering. This is Brenda. Hi, Brenda. My name is Victoria Garcia. I'm calling about an invoice for the Mercer Garcia wedding. Invoice number 2099A. There was a pause. The sound of typing. Ma'am, I don't have a Mercer Garcia wedding in our books, Brenda said, and our invoice numbers are 6 digits. We haven't used alphanumeric codes since 2018. Can you look up that old number? I asked. 2099A? Hold on. Let me check the archive. A minute of hold music. Okay, here it is, Brenda said. Invoice 2099A, dated June 4th, 2018. It was for a corporate retreat for, let's see, Nexus Realty. Amount, $4,000. Thank you, Brenda, I said. That is all I needed. Someone had taken an old invoice, probably one Caleb found in a file cabinet from an old job at a realty company, and photoshopped it. They changed the date, changed the client, changed the amount to $18,400, and submitted it to the trust to justify the withdrawal. It was forgery. It was wire fraud. And because the amount was over $10,000, it was a felony. I hung up. I had them. I drove home. The sun was setting, casting long, bruised shadows across the street. I walked into my apartment and locked the door. I felt like I was fortifying a bunker. My phone buzzed. It was Natalie. Not a call, a text. If you show up to the wedding, I will have security remove you, and I will tell everyone, Grandma's friends, the cousins, everyone, that you stole from me. I will tell them you embezzled the trust fund, and that's why you froze the accounts. To cover your tracks, don't test me, Victoria. I stared at the screen. It was a brilliant strategy. Project the crime onto the accuser. If I didn't show up, my absence would be taken as an admission of guilt. She couldn't face us, they would say. She stole the money and hid. She wasn't just trying to exclude me. She was trying to set a narrative that would destroy my professional reputation and my family standing forever. If the story got out that I, a financial manager, had embezzled a trust, I would lose my license. I would lose my job. She was willing to burn my life to the ground to cover for Caleb. I put the phone down on the desk. I turned to my computer. I opened a new document. Notice of Trustee Action. 2. The beneficiaries of the Garcia Family Trust. From Victoria Garcia. Trustee. Date, October 15th. Suspension of disbursements due to verified fraudulent activity. I began to type. I detailed everything. 1. Unauthorized access to main account balance information via third-party emails. 2. Submission of falsified invoice, $20.99. A. Purporting to be from Blue Sky Catering. 3. Identification of Avery Finch Events, LLC, as a shell entity with no business history. Listing trustee as guarantor without consent. 4. Commingling of personal loan proceeds, HELOC, with trust assets to obscure the source of funds. I wrote for 2 hours. I attached the screenshots. I attached the credit report. I attached the notes from my call with Blue Sky Catering. I printed 3 copies, one for Mara Wren, one for the Red Grove investigator, and one for me. I put my copy in a thick cream-colored envelope. Then I walked to my closet. I pushed aside my work suits and found a dress I hadn't worn in years. It was navy blue, simple, elegant, the kind of dress you wore to a funeral or a board meeting. I was going to the wedding, not to drink champagne, not to catch the bouquet. I was going because if I didn't, the lie would win. I was going to stand in that room, in front of the people who were whispering about my jealousy. With the evidence in my purse, I was going to be the witness they didn't want. I looked at the dress, and then at the envelope on my desk. "Okay, Natalie," I said to the empty room. "You want to tell a story? Let's tell the whole thing." I turned off the lights. I didn't cry that night. I was past tears. I was in the cold, quiet place where decisions are made. I would save my parents from homelessness, even if they hated me for it. I would stop the theft, even if it meant arresting my sister's husband. But first, I had to survive the wedding. The certified letter arrived on a Tuesday, carried by a postman who looked apologetic about the rain dripping from the brim of his hat. He handed me the stiff cardboard envelope with a grimace, waiting while I signed the green return receipt card. My signature looked jagged, a nervous scrawl that betrayed the calm facade I was trying to maintain. I took the envelope into my kitchen and set it on the granite island. The return address was printed in bold. Sans serif font, Crown Spire Holdings, Legal Division, Wilmington, Delaware. I used a paring knife to slice it open. Inside was a single sheet of heavy bond paper. The letterhead was embossed, designed to intimidate, to Victoria Garcia, trustee of the Garcia Family Trust. Outstanding balance for contracted bridal services. Amount due, $14,210. This letter serves as a formal demand for immediate payment of the outstanding balance related to services rendered for the Mercer Garcia wedding event. As the authorized signatory for the contracting entity, Avery Finch Events, LLC, has indicated that trust assets are the designated funding source. Failure to remit payment within 48 hours will result in legal action against the trust for breach of contract and potential filing of a lis pendens against any associated real property. I read it twice. The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. They were not asking Natalie anymore. They were coming directly for me, and they were threatening a lis pendens, a lien, against real property. The trust did not own real property anymore, having sold my grandmother's house. But the threat implied they knew about my parents' house. They knew about the home equity loan. They knew where the pressure points were. I drove to Mara Wren's office without calling first. I walked past the receptionist, clutching the letter like a weapon. Mara was in a meeting, but she saw my face through the glass wall of the conference room and stepped out immediately. She ushered me into her office and closed the door. I handed her the letter. She read it, her eyes narrowing behind her glasses. She tapped a fingernail against the paper. "This is aggressive," she said softly. "Extremely aggressive. Can they do this?" I asked. "Can they sue the trust for a bill I never signed?" "They can try," Mara said, sitting down on the edge of her desk. "It is a pressure tactic, Victoria. They are banking on the fact that trust litigation is expensive and public. If they sue, it becomes public record. They will allege that you, the trustee, are withholding funds arbitrarily, causing damages to vendors. They will paint you as the villain who ruined a wedding and stiffed a small business. But the business is fake," I said. Ivory Finch is a shell. Proving that takes time, Mara countered. And in the meantime, the lawsuit sits there. It freezes everything. It scares the other banks. And most importantly, it creates a narrative. If you pay, you are funding a potential fraud, and you are liable. If you refuse, they smear you and drag the trust into court, draining what is left on legal fees. So it is a trap, I said. It is a pincer movement, Mara corrected. They are squeezing you from both sides. Legal pressure from the top, emotional pressure from the bottom. They want you to panic and cut the check just to make it go away. She handed the letter back to me. Do not pay it, she commanded. Let them sue. If they file, we countersue for fraud and piercing the corporate veil. But Victoria, you need to be ready. This is going to get ugly before it gets better. I left her office feeling heavier than when I arrived. The rain had stopped, but the sky remained a bruised purple. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Natalie. Can we talk? Please, just coffee. Me and Caleb. We need to clear the air. I stared at the screen. My instinct was to say no. My instinct was to run. But Mara's voice was in my head. Document everything. And I had questions. Questions that a letter from Delaware couldn't answer. 4 o'clock. I typed back. The Grindstone Cafe on Main. See you there, she replied instantly. I arrived at the Grindstone 10 minutes early. I picked a table in the corner, with my back to the wall, giving me a clear view of the entrance. I ordered a black coffee and waited. At 4 o'clock exactly, the door opened. Natalie walked in first. She looked exhausted. Her face was pale, her eyes puffy, and she was wearing a sweatshirt that looked too big for her. She looked like the little sister I used to carry to bed when she fell asleep in the car, but behind her was Caleb Mercer. It was the first time I had seen him since the engagement party. He was wearing a navy blazer over a crisp white shirt. No tie. He looked polished, healthy, and entirely out of place in a small-town coffee shop. He scanned the room, spotted me, and put a hand on Natalie's lower back, guiding her toward me like she was a prop. They sat down. Caleb pulled out the chair for Natalie, a gesture that looked performative rather than polite. Victoria, Caleb said, flashing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Thanks for meeting us. I know tensions are high. Hello, Caleb, I said. I looked at Natalie. Hi, Nat? Natalie looked at the table. Hi. Look, Caleb started, leaning forward and clasping his hands. I think there has been a massive misunderstanding here. Natalie tells me you are worried about the finances, and I get it. You are the big sister. You are protective. That is admirable. He spoke with a smooth, rhythmic cadence, like he was pitching a timeshare. But you have to understand the business side of this, he continued. The wedding industry is cash-heavy. Vendors need liquidity. When you froze the accounts, you created a liquidity crunch. That triggers penalty clauses in the contracts. That letter you got from Crown Spire? That is automatic. It is just an algorithm chasing a debt. We can make it all go away if we just unblock the flow. The flow, I repeated. You mean the money? I mean the liquidity, Caleb corrected, his smile tightening. Money is static. Liquidity is active. We are trying to build a life here. Victoria, Natalie and I have opportunities lined up after the wedding, investments, but we need to clear these hurdles first. You are thinking about this emotionally. You are thinking like a family member, which is sweet, but it is not business. I am the trustee, I said coldly. My job is legally defined. It is not emotional. It feels emotional, Caleb said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. Natalie says you have been intense, checking up on us, calling vendors. It looks like you are trying to find problems because you don't want to let go of control. Is that it? Are you having trouble letting her grow up? He was good. He was twisting the knife with surgical precision, using psychobabble to dismiss my legal concerns. I looked at Natalie. She was picking at a loose thread on her sleeve, refusing to meet my gaze. Natalie, I said, is that what you think? That I'm doing this to control you? She looked up, and her eyes were filled with tears. I just want it to be over. Tori, I just want to get married and leave. Leave? I asked. Leave where? For the honeymoon. Caleb interjected quickly. We are going to Bali. It is all booked, non-refundable. I turned my attention back to him. I let the silence stretch for 5 seconds, watching him. He held my gaze, but there was a flicker of annoyance in his jaw. I have a question, I said. Shoot, Caleb said, leaning back. Why the ATM at the highway rest stop? The reaction was instantaneous. Natalie flinched. Her head snapped up, her eyes wide with sudden, genuine fear. She looked at Caleb, panic written across her features. Caleb did not flinch, but his smile vanished. His face went flat, the charm evaporating like mist. What? He asked. The withdrawals, I said, keeping my voice steady. The night I froze the account, someone was pulling cash out of an ATM at Rest Stop 44 on Interstate 95. That is an hour away. It is nowhere near the florist or the caterer. Why were you there, Caleb? I wasn't there, Caleb said. His voice was hard now. I don't know what you are talking about. Natalie's card was used, I said. And since Natalie was in Merriwick, someone else had it. Someone who was driving south, toward the airport, maybe. Or maybe just handing cash to someone in a parking lot. It is irrelevant, Caleb snapped. He waved his hand dismissively. You are obsessing over details because you don't understand the big picture. We had a courier picking up supplies. Maybe they stopped for gas. Who cares? A courier using a trust fund debit card to withdraw cash in structured amounts? I asked. That is a felony. Caleb. It is irrelevant, he said, his voice rising. People at the nearby tables turned to look. You are fishing. Victoria, you are trying to sabotage this because you are miserable. Natalie told me everything. She told me how you hold the money over her head, how you make her beg. I never made her beg, I said quietly. Come on, Nat, Caleb said, standing up abruptly. He grabbed Natalie's arm, pulling her up. We are done here. She is not going to listen to reason. She wants to see you fail. Wait, Natalie said. She looked at me, her eyes desperate. Tori, please, just pay Crown Spire. If you pay them, they won't sue. Mom and Dad won't lose the house. Please, I promise I will pay you back. Natalie, Caleb hissed. Don't beg her. He dragged her toward the door. Natalie looked back at me once, her face crumbling, before the bell above the door chimed and they disappeared into the street. I sat there for a long time, staring at my cold coffee. Irrelevant. He hadn't denied it. He had dismissed it. And Natalie's fear, she knew. She knew exactly why that card was at the rest stop. I drove home, my mind racing. At 7 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my mother. I debated not answering. I was tired of the shouting. I was tired of the guilt. But I needed to know what Caleb had told them. I answered. Hello, Mom. Victoria, Diane said. Her voice was surprisingly calm. Too calm. It was the voice she used when she was negotiating a discount at a department store. I just spoke to Caleb. He says the meeting didn't go well. He threatened me, I said, and he refused to explain why trust money is being withdrawn at highway rest stops. He didn't threaten you, Diane sighed. He is just stressed. We all are. Look, Victoria, I have been thinking, this feud, it is silly. It looks bad for the family. We need to be united on Saturday. I agree, I said. But I won't fund a crime to do it. Listen to me, Diane said, her voice lowering. I have a proposal. If you release the pending wire transfer, the $14,000, I will make sure you are invited. I will make sure you have a seat at the head table. I will tell everyone that there was a banking error and that you fixed it. I will fix your reputation. Victoria. I froze. She was bargaining. She was trading my attendance at my sister's wedding for cash. It was a transaction. An invitation was not a gesture of love. It was a commodity to be sold. You want me to buy my way in? I asked, my voice trembling slightly. I want you to be part of the family, Diane said. But you have to help the family. That is how it works. We help each other. Gordon is sick with worry. Victoria, his heart. You know his blood pressure. Do you want to be the reason he has a stroke before he walks Natalie down the aisle? The cruelty of it took my breath away. She was weaponizing my father's health. Mom, I said, does Dad know you are making this call? Gordon wants peace, she said, just like I do. So, can I tell Caleb the transfer is clear? I closed my eyes. I felt a severance happen in my chest, a small, vital cord that had connected me to her approval for 33 years finally snapped. No, I said. You can't. Victoria. No. Mom, the account stays frozen. If you want to invite me because I am your daughter, not because I am an ATM. Then don't bother showing up, Diane snapped, because if you come without the money, you are nothing to us. The line went dead. I sat in my living room, the silence ringing in my ears. You are nothing to us. It was brutal, but it was also clarifying. I was not fighting for their love anymore. That battle was lost. I was fighting for their survival. Even if they hated me for it, I had to stop them from drowning. I stood up and went to my desk. I needed to work. I pulled out the folder Mara had told me to keep. I needed to verify everything. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the Larkspur house. It was late, but wedding venues often had managers working evenings. Larkspur house, this is Julian. Hi, Julian, I said, putting on my best professional voice. My name is Victoria Garcia. My sister, Natalie, is getting married there this Saturday. Oh, yes, the Mercer Garcia wedding. Looking forward to it. I am just coordinating some final payments from the trust side. I lied smoothly. I wanted to confirm that the initial deposit cleared correctly. There was some confusion with the banks. Let me pull up the file, Julian said. I heard clicking. Yes, we are all set here. The deposit of $10,000 was received via cashier's check 3 weeks ago. Cashier's check? I asked. Do you have the remitter name on that? One moment. Yes, remitter is Garcia Family Trust. I frowned. A cashier's check meant someone went to the bank physically, withdrew funds, and had the check cut. Natalie didn't have that authority. Only I did. Unless they used the debit card to buy a money order at a grocery store or a third-party check casher, and then use that to pay the venue. Okay, I said. And the balance? The remaining balance is due on the day of the event, Julian said. Per the contract, although Mr. Mercer's team has been very specific about the loadout times. Mr. Mercer's team? Yes, he has some planners helping him, and the security detail. I sat up straighter. Security detail? Yes, Julian said, sounding a little hesitant. It is a bit unusual for us. Usually, we provide the security, but Mr. Mercer insisted on hiring an outside firm. Titan Protection, I think. They demanded a strict no-surprises policy. They want a guest list finalized 48 hours prior. And they are checking IDs at the gate. He said it was because of some high-profile guests on his side. I see, I said, my pulse quickening. Checking IDs. That was how they planned to keep me out. It wasn't just bridesmaids blocking the door. It was hired muscle. And Julian, I asked, is there anything else unusual about the request? Well, he laughed nervously. Just the timeline. They want the reception to end strictly at 11, usually. Parties go until midnight, but they have a hard out at 11. The breakdown crew is scheduled for 11:15 sharp. Thank you, Julian, I said. You have been very helpful. I hung up. Private security, ID checks, a hard stop at 11 o'clock. This wasn't a party. It was a military operation. They were locking down the perimeter. Why? To keep me out? Or to keep someone else out? Or to keep the guests in? My computer pinged. I turned to the screen. It was an email. From Unknown sender, subject, FWD. Mercer, wedding flow. Attachment, Mercer Slough. Flow. Final? Sex. I stared at it. The sender address was a string of random characters, likely a burner account. I hovered the mouse over the attachment. It was an Excel spreadsheet. I ran a virus scan on it. Clean. I opened it. The spreadsheet filled the screen. It was a timeline, color-coded and detailed. Row 1, 09:00 a.m. Vendor arrival. Row 10, 05:00 p.m. Ceremony start. Row 20, 06:30 p.m. Cocktail hour. Gift collection. I scrolled down. Row 45, 10:00 p.m. Cake cutting. Row 50, 10:45 p.m. Couple exit. And then, at the very bottom, in a cell highlighted in red, Row 55, 12:00 a.m. System transfer. Crown Spire. Notes. Auto execution upon verification of signature bond. I stared at the words. Auto execution. It wasn't just a wedding schedule. It was a fun flow schedule. I looked at the column to the right. It listed amounts. Gift table estimate, $15,000. Trust release, projected, $14,000. HELOC release, projected, $65,000. Total projected inflow, $94,000. And then the outflow, transfer to offshore entity, $90,000. Agent fee, $4,000. The wedding was a collection bucket. They were gathering every scrap of liquidity they could find. My parents' loan. The trust remainder. The cash gifts from guests. And at midnight, it was all scheduled to move. Transfer out. Midnight after ceremony. Elias was right. The wedding was the deadline. But who sent me this? I looked at the email again. There was no text in the body, just the file. Was it Natalie? A cry for help? Or was it someone else? Maybe someone on Caleb's team who was getting cold feet, or a disgruntled employee at Crown Spire. It didn't matter who sent it. What mattered was what it proved. This wasn't just fraud, it was a planned extraction. They were going to strip my parents clean, take the cash gifts from our friends and family, and then move the money offshore before the hangover set in. And if I didn't stop it, my father would be left with a $65,000 lien on his house and no way to pay it. He would lose the home I grew up in. I leaned back in my chair. The fear was gone. The hurt was gone. All that was left was cold, hard calculation. They had private security. They had a hard out at 11. They had a digital trigger set for midnight. I looked at the calendar. The wedding was in 3 days. I picked up my pen and opened a fresh notebook. Goal, stop the transfer. Goal, protect the assets. Goal, do not get arrested. I was going to that wedding. And I wasn't just bringing a gift. I was bringing the one thing Caleb Mercer wasn't expecting. I was bringing the truth. But I couldn't just walk in the front door, not with Titan protection checking IDs. I needed a way in, and I needed backup. I thought about the venue manager. Julian. He seemed nice. He seemed oblivious. I picked up my phone and dialed Elias Thorne, the bank investigator. Elias, I said when he answered. It's Victoria. I have a timeline. Midnight, Saturday. You have proof? Elias asked, his voice sharp. I have a spreadsheet, I said. And I know where the money is going, Crown Spire. Okay, Elias said. That is actionable. But we can't stop a transfer based on a spreadsheet from an anonymous source. We need to catch them initiating it, or we need to catch them with the cash. They are collecting cash gifts, I said. $15,000 projected. That is petty cash to them, Elias said. The big money is the digital transfer. If they trigger that HELOC release, I block the trust, I said. But I can't block the HELOC. My parents control that. Then you need to stop your parents from authorizing the release, Elias said. They won't listen to me, I said. They think I am the enemy. Then you need to be there when they try to do it, Elias said. You need to be in the room. I plan to be, I said. Victoria, Elias warned. If these guys hired security, they are not playing. Do not do anything stupid. I am a financial operations manager. Elias, I said, staring at the red cell on the spreadsheet. I don't do stupid. I do calculated. I hung up. I looked at the dress hanging on my closet door. The navy blue sheath. It needed a jacket, something with pockets. I was done being the victim. I was done being the scapegoat. My sister wanted a wedding? Fine. I was going to give her a show she would never forget. The Larkspur house sat on the edge of the cliffs like a wedding cake left out in the rain, ornate, white, and slightly ominous against the darkening sky. I parked my sedan in the overflow lot, far away from the limousines and the rented vintage convertibles. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. My navy dress was sharp, professional, and entirely unfestive. I did not look like a sister of the bride. I looked like an auditor arriving to close the books. I walked toward the entrance, the gravel crunching loudly under my heels. At the main gate, 2 men in black suits with earpieces stood with their arms crossed. Titan protection. They looked more like nightclub bouncers than wedding security. Name? The taller one asked, not looking me in the eye. Victoria Garcia, I said. Sister of the bride? He scanned a clipboard. His finger traced down the list, stopped, and then tapped the paper. You are not on the main guest list, Ms. Garcia, he said, but we have a note here to admit you on a probationary basis. Probationary, I repeated. My mother's touch. She was letting me in, but she wanted me to know I was on a leash. Go ahead, he grunted, stepping aside. Do not cause a scene. I walked up the stone path to the reception hall. The ceremony had just ended on the lawn, and guests were filing toward the patio for cocktail hour. I scanned the crowd for a familiar face, but everyone seemed to be part of Caleb's world. Men in shiny suits, women with too much jewelry, people who laughed too loudly and looked around to see who was watching. I made my way to the seating chart, an elaborate easel draped in ivy and white roses. I found table 4, where the family should be. Gordon Garcia, Diane Garcia, Aunt Linda, Cousin Mike. My name was not there. I scanned the other tables. Table 10, Table 15, nothing. Then I saw it, at the very bottom of the chart. Pinned to the corner almost as an afterthought was a single card. Table, unassigned. Seat, V, Garcia. It wasn't a table. It was a holding pen. They hadn't even given me the dignity of a number. I felt a flash of heat rise in my cheeks, but I swallowed it down. This was the strategy. Humiliation. If they could make me feel small, they thought I would shrink away and let them take what they wanted. I turned to enter the main hall, but my path was blocked by a wall of pastel pink chiffon. 3 bridesmaids stood shoulder to shoulder. I recognized Jessica, Natalie's best friend from high school, and 2 other girls I didn't know. They held champagne flutes like shields. Victoria, Jessica said. Her voice was sugary, but her eyes were hard. We were hoping you wouldn't come. Hello, Jessica, I said evenly. Excuse me, I tried to step around them, but they shifted to block me. The bride requested no drama, Jessica recited, her smile tight. Natalie is very fragile right now. She doesn't need your negative energy. I am not here to bring negative energy, I said. I am here to witness my sister's marriage. We know why you are here, one of the other girls sneered. Diane told us, you are just mad because you aren't the center of attention. Just stay in the back, okay? Don't make it weird. Don't make it weird. My mother's words, echoing through a stranger's mouth. I will be invisible, I promised. They assessed me for a moment, then parted just enough to let me squeeze through. As I passed, Jessica leaned in. Seriously, Victoria, if you ruin this, you are dead to everyone in this town. I walked into the hall. It was spectacular. Crystal chandeliers, floor-to-ceiling floral arrangements, a live band playing jazz standards. It smelled of lilies and money. I grabbed a glass of sparkling water from a passing tray and retreated to the edge of the room. I needed to find my father. I spotted him 10 minutes later. He was not inside the hall. He was standing on the terrace, alone, gripping the stone railing and staring out at the gray ocean. I slipped out the side door and approached him. "Dad?" He jumped. When he turned to face me, my heart broke. He looked 20 years older than he had last week. His skin was the color of old parchment, and there was a sheen of sweat on his upper lip. He was trembling. "Tori," he whispered. "You came." "I came," I said. "Are you okay?" He laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Okay? No, I am not okay. I feel like I'm going to throw up." "Dad," I said, stepping closer. "You don't have to do this. Whatever documents they want you to sign tonight, you don't have to sign them." He looked at me with wide, terrified eyes. "It is already done. Tori, the loan is approved. The money is sitting there. Diane says. She says it is just a bridge. She says everything will reset after the ceremony. Once they are married, Caleb's investments pay out, and he pays off the house, and we go back to normal." "There is no investment," I said gently. "Dad, listen to me. There is no reset button. Caleb is using that money to pay a debt to Crown Spire." Gordon squeezed his eyes shut. "I know," he whispered. I froze. "You know?" "I heard him," Gordon said, his voice shaking. "I heard him talking on the phone in the bridal suite. He said, if the wire doesn't clear by midnight, I am a dead man." He wasn't talking about business. Tori. He sounded scared. "Then we have to stop it," I said. "We have to cancel the release." "I can't," Gordon choked out. "Your mother, she is convinced. She says if we back out now, we lose Natalie. She says you are poisoning me against them. She made me promise not to listen to you." He looked at me, tears leaking from the corners of his eyes. "I am a coward, Victoria," he said. "I signed the papers because I was afraid of her yelling. I sold our house because I wanted some peace and quiet. I am not going to let you lose the house," I said fiercely. "I am going to fix this." "How?" he asked. "They have security. They have lawyers. You are just one girl." "I am the trustee," I said, "and I brought my own paperwork." Before he could answer, the doors opened and the bridal party was announced. The music swelled. The guests cheered. Gordon wiped his face, put on a mask of a smile, and went inside to play his part. I followed, staying in the shadows near the bar. The dinner was a blur of clinking silverware and polite conversation. I sat at my unassigned table, which turned out to be a high top near the kitchen doors, usually reserved for vendors. I ate my salad alone. Then came the toasts. The best man gave a speech that was full of inside jokes about deals and closers, which made the groom's side laugh and the bride's side look confused. Then, my mother stood up. Diane held the microphone like a scepter. She looked regal in a silver gown, her hair perfectly coiffed. She smiled at the room, basking in the spotlight. "Welcome, everyone," she began. "When Natalie was born, I knew she was special. She was a light, a free spirit." She paused, looking down at Natalie and Caleb at the head table. "It hasn't always been easy for Natalie," Diane said, her voice dropping to a theatrical hush. "She has had to fight for her happiness. She has had to survive in a house where, well, let's just say, where strictness was often mistaken for love." I felt the air in the room shift. People turned to look at me. I kept my face blank, sipping my water. "Some people," Diane continued, her eyes locking onto mine across the room, "think that love means control. They think that safety means locking doors and freezing assets. They think that spreadsheets are more important than dreams." A murmur went through the crowd. "But Natalie," Diane said, her voice rising triumphantly, "you survived. You survived a sister who always tried to clip your wings. You survived the judgment. And today, you are flying free. To Caleb and Natalie. May you never let anyone control you again." "Hear, hear!" shouted the groom's side. My mother raised her glass. She had done it. She had publicly rewritten history. She had turned my financial protection into abuse and her negligence into heroism. She had turned the entire room against me. I set my glass down. I did not clap. The music started up again. The cake was cut. I went to the bar. I needed a ginger ale. My stomach was churning. Enjoying the show? I turned. Natalie was standing next to me. She looked beautiful in her white lace gown. But up close, the illusion shattered. Her makeup was caked over tear tracks. Her hands, clutching a glass of wine, were shaking so hard the liquid rippled. "Hello, Natalie," I said. "You look lovely." "Cut the crap, Victoria," she hissed. She leaned in close, smelling of expensive perfume and fear. "Fix the accounts, now." "I can't do that," I said. "You know why?" "If you don't unfreeze the trust by 10 o'clock, she whispered, her voice trembling with intensity, "I am going to go back to that microphone. And I am going to tell everyone that you stole from Grandma's trust. I will say you embezzled $50,000 and that you are blocking the account to cover your tracks before the audit." I stared at her. "You would perjure yourself? You would file a false police report against your own sister?" "I will do whatever I have to do," she cried, her voice cracking. It wasn't anger. It was pure, unadulterated desperation. "You don't understand. It has to happen tonight. The money has to move tonight." "Or what?" I asked. "Or Caleb is a dead man?" Her face went white. "How did you know that?" "Dad told me," I said. "Natalie, listen to me. This isn't a wedding. It's a payoff. Caleb is in trouble with Crown Spire. If you give him this money, it vanishes. You will never see it again, and Mom and Dad will lose the house." "He loves me," she insisted, but she sounded like she was trying to convince herself. "He is going to fix everything. Just give us the money." "No," I said. "Fine," she spat. "Then watch me destroy you." She turned and stormed back toward the head table. I took a breath. My phone buzzed in my clutch. I pulled it out. It was a text from the bank fraud unit. The number I had saved. "Urgent. Active attempt to bypass security questions on account 8892. Caller is claiming to be you. Caller has your social security number and is attempting to reset the PIN. They weren't waiting for me to unfreeze it. They were trying to break in, right now. While my mother was toasting and my sister was threatening me, someone, probably Caleb or one of his groomsmen, was on the phone with the bank, impersonating me. I looked at the head table. Caleb was missing. I dialed the fraud investigator. Elias Thorne. "Thorne," he answered on the first ring. "They are trying to hack the account," I said, keeping my voice low. "Right now, during the reception." "We see it," Elias said. "We are tracing the call. It is coming from a burner phone pinging off the tower nearest to your location, the Larkspur house. It's Caleb," I said, "or one of his people." "Victoria," Elias said, "we have enough for probable cause on identity theft, but we need to ID the caller. Can you see who is on a phone?" I scanned the room. The hall was dark, lit only by candles and strobe lights from the DJ booth. Then I felt a hand on my arm. I spun around. It was one of the groomsmen, not the best man, the younger one, Caleb's cousin. I remembered him from the rehearsal dinner months ago. A kid named Erratic, sweaty, constantly checking his watch. "You need to fix it," he whispered. His eyes were wide and bloodshot. "Excuse me?" I said, taking a step back. "The transfer," he stammered. "Caleb said you blocked the transfer. You don't get it. Lady, these guys, Crown Spire, they aren't banks. If the transfer doesn't happen tonight, there's going to be consequences. For all of us." He looked terrified. Not threatening, terrified. "Who are these guys?" I asked. "The investors," he said. "They are waiting. The timeline is midnight. If the money isn't in the offshore account by midnight, they come for the collateral. They come for everything." "You mean my parents' house?" I said. "I mean everything," he said. "Just let it go through. Please, I don't want to get hurt." He backed away and disappeared into the crowd. I stood there, the bass of the music thumping in my chest. Consequences, identity theft, collateral. This wasn't a family squabble. This was a criminal conspiracy happening in real time, with my parents as the unwitting victims and me as the only obstacle. I looked at the clock on the wall. 10:15. Natalie was whispering to Diane at the head table. Diane looked furious. She stood up and started walking toward the DJ booth. I knew what was coming. She was going to give Natalie the microphone. They were going to announce the lie. They were going to accuse me of theft in front of 200 witnesses to pressure me into unlocking the funds. I couldn't let them control the narrative. Not for one more second. I moved. I walked fast, weaving through the dancing couples. I reached the DJ booth just as Diane was approaching from the other side. The DJ, a young guy with headphones around his neck, looked up, startled. "Microphone," I said. I didn't ask. I held out my hand. The mother of the bride was just, "I am the trustee of the estate paying your fee," I said calmly. "Give me the microphone, now." Something in my voice, the cold, absolute authority of a woman who spends her life managing risk, made him obey. He handed me the wireless mic. Diane froze 10 feet away. Her eyes went wide. "Victoria, what are you doing? Sit down." I ignored her. I stepped onto the small riser next to the booth. I tapped the microphone. Thump thump. The sound echoed through the hall. The music cut out. The room went silent. 200 faces turned toward me. I saw Natalie at the head table. She looked like a deer in headlights. I saw Caleb emerging from the hallway, a phone still in his hand. He stopped dead when he saw me. "Good evening," I said. My voice was steady. It didn't shake. I wasn't yelling. I was speaking with the volume of a boardroom presentation. "My name is Victoria Garcia. I am the sister of the bride." A few people clapped politely, confused. "I am also the sole trustee of the Garcia Family Trust," I continued. The room got quieter. "Tonight, there have been some rumors circulating about why the trust accounts have been frozen," I said. I looked directly at Diane. "I am here to clarify the record." "Turn it off!" Diane screamed at the DJ. "Cut the sound!" The DJ looked at me. I shook my head slightly. He didn't touch the board. "The accounts are not frozen because of jealousy," I said, my voice projecting clearly over Diane's shouting. "They are frozen because of verified fraudulent activity." A gasp went through the room. "As of 9 o'clock tonight," I said, locking eyes with Caleb. "An individual at this wedding attempted to impersonate me to bypass bank security protocols and access funds illegally. This attempt was traced by the bank's fraud unit to this location." Caleb took a step back. His face was gray. "Furthermore," I continued, "I have evidence that invoices submitted to the trust for this wedding were forged. The wedding you are attending is being used as a mechanism to launder money to a debt-holding company called Crown Spire." "Liar!" Natalie screamed. She stood up, knocking over her chair. "She's lying! She stole the money!" "If I stole the money," I said, turning to face the crowd, "then why is the bank investigator for Red Grove Mutual currently parked in the driveway with the local police, waiting to take statements?" It was a bluff. Elias was on the phone, not in the driveway. But Caleb didn't know that. The effect was instantaneous. Caleb looked at the door. He looked at his watch. Then he looked at Natalie. "We have to go," he mouthed. "What?" Natalie yelled. "No, make her stop." "We have to go," Caleb shouted. He didn't wait for her. He turned and bolted toward the kitchen exit. "Caleb?" Natalie cried. She looked around, confused, terrified. The fairy tale was dissolving into a nightmare. "Caleb, wait!" She hiked up her dress and ran after him. The room exploded into chaos. Guests stood up, knocking over wine glasses. People were shouting. The Titan protection guards moved from the doors, unsure who to tackle. Diane stood in the middle of the dance floor, her mouth open, staring at the empty space where the groom had been. "Victoria!" she shrieked, her voice tearing through the noise. "What did you do? You ruined everything." I lowered the microphone. I watched Caleb's cousins sprint out the side door. I watched the groomsmen exchanging panicked looks, and I realized the truth. They weren't running because I embarrassed them. They were running because the clock was ticking. The wedding wasn't the ceremony. The wedding wasn't the reception. The wedding was the distraction. The real event was the exit. And I had just locked the doors. I stepped down from the riser. My legs felt weak. But I didn't collapse. I walked over to my father, who was sitting at table 4. His head in his hands. "Dad," I said softly. He looked up. "He ran." Gordon whispered. "He just ran." "I know," I said. "But the money didn't." I looked at my phone. It was 11 o'clock. The deadline was 1 hour away, and the groom had just fled the scene. I had saved the house, but as I looked at my mother, who was now sobbing on the floor surrounded by confused relatives, I knew I had lost the family. The blue lights arrived before the sirens. They washed over the walls of the ballroom, turning the crystal chandeliers into spinning clusters of sapphire and ice. It was a surreal strobe effect that froze the wedding guests in place. Forks halfway to mouths, wine glasses lowered, eyes wide with the sudden, jarring intrusion of the real world into their expensive fantasy. I had not called the police. I had not dialed 911. I had simply stood on a riser and told the truth. But the banking system does not care about dramatic speeches. It cares about algorithms. And when Caleb, or whoever was holding the burner phone, attempted to brute force the security questions on the trust account using my social security number, the Red Grove Mutual Fraud Detection System did exactly what it was designed to do. It triggered a high-priority alert to local law enforcement for active identity theft in progress, triangulated to the address of the Larkspur House. The doors to the reception hall burst open. 3 uniformed officers entered, their hands resting near their belts, their eyes scanning the room not for a bride, but for a threat. "We have a report of financial felony in progress," the lead officer announced. His voice was deep, authoritative, and completely at odds with the jazz playlist that had just cut out. "We need to speak with Victoria Garcia and Natalie Mercer." The room let out a collective gasp. My mother, Diane, moved faster than I had seen her move in years. She threw herself in front of the officer, her silver gown shimmering like a barricade. "This is a wedding," she screamed. "How dare you? Who called you? It was her, wasn't it?" She pointed a shaking finger at me. "My jealous daughter called you to ruin this." "Ma'am, step back," the officer said, his face impassive. "We received an automated dispatch from Red Grove Bank regarding an active cyber intrusion." "My daughter is the bride," Diane shrieked. She tried to physically block his path, spreading her arms wide. "She is a victim. You cannot speak to her. She is having a panic attack." "Ma'am, if you obstruct me, I will place you in handcuffs," the officer said. He didn't shout. He didn't have to. The threat hung in the air, heavy and absolute. Diane recoiled as if slapped. She looked around the room, searching for allies, for someone to validate her outrage. But the guests were shrinking away. They were checking their phones, grabbing their purses, looking for the exits. The social contract had been broken. This wasn't a party anymore. It was a crime scene. I stepped down from the DJ riser. My legs felt like lead, but I forced them to move. "I am Victoria Garcia," I said, walking toward the police. "I am the trustee. The alert likely came from my accounts." "You are the victim of the identity theft?" the officer asked, pulling out a notepad. "I am the target," I corrected. "I believe the perpetrator was the groom, Caleb Mercer. He just fled the building via the kitchen exit." "He ran?" the officer asked, his eyebrows shooting up. "He ran," I confirmed. "No!" Diane shouted. "He went to check on the car. He is stressed. He did not run." "Diane, stop it." The voice was quiet, but it cut through the hysteria like a knife. We all turned. Gordon Garcia, my father, was standing by table 4. He was gripping the back of a chair so hard his knuckles were white. He looked small, defeated, and utterly exhausted. "Gordon, tell them," Diane commanded. Tell them Caleb is a good boy. He is gone, Diane, Gordon said. His voice cracked, then found a strange, jagged strength. I saw him. I saw him grab the bag from under the table, the black duffel bag. He didn't go to the car. He went to the woods. You are confused, Diane hissed. I am not confused, Gordon roared. The sound of his voice, usually so mild, so deferential, shocked the room into silence. My father never yelled. My father never fought back. I am not confused, Gordon repeated, tears streaming down his face. I signed the papers, Diane. I signed them because you told me to. You told me it was just a bridge loan. You told me Caleb would pay it back on Monday, but I read the fine print. Diane, I read it in the bathroom 10 minutes ago. He looked at me, his eyes full of shame. It wasn't a bridge loan, he whispered. It was a deed transfer. If the money isn't paid back by midnight tonight, we don't just owe them interest. They take the title. We don't own the house anymore. Diane, Caleb does, or his company does. Diane stared at him, her mouth opening and closing. No, that is not true. Caleb explained it to me. He said, He lied, Gordon screamed. He lied to get the equity, and I let him do it because I wanted you to stop looking at me like I was a failure. He collapsed into the chair, burying his face in his hands. The silence that followed was heavy with the wreckage of 40 years of marriage. My mother stood frozen, her narrative shattering around her. She looked at the guests, her friends, her neighbors, and saw only pity and horror. The police officer cleared his throat. We need to secure the perimeter. If the suspect is on foot, he can't have gone far. I walked over to the officer. There is a bank investigator named Elias Thorne on his way. He has the file on Crown Spire Holdings. Crown Spire? The officer asked. He exchanged a look with his partner. We have a bulletin on them. Traveling fraud ring. They usually hit retirement communities. This is the first time they have hit a wedding. It is the same mechanic, I said dully. Trust, pressure, a deadline. Where is the bride? The officer asked. I looked around. Natalie was gone. I will find her, I said. I walked out of the ballroom. The hallway was empty, the carpet patterned with endless, dizzying swirls. I checked the bridal suite. Empty. I checked the bathroom. Empty. I found her in the service corridor, a narrow hallway leading to the loading dock. She was sitting on a crate of soda bottles, her knees pulled up to her chest. Her veil was torn, trailing on the dirty linoleum floor. Her mascara ran in thick black streaks down her face. She didn't look up when I approached. She was staring at her phone. He's not answering, she whispered. He won't answer. Nat, I said. He threw the phone away. It was a burner. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red, swollen, and filled with a confusion so profound it looked like physical pain. He said we were going to Bali, she said. He showed me the tickets. He showed me the villa. They were fake, I said gently. Just like the invoice, just like the catering bill. No, she sobbed. No, you don't understand. He wasn't just taking the money. He said if I got the trust money, and Dad gave the loan money, we could pay off his investors and have enough left over to start fresh. He said he was going to double it. Tori, he said he was going to pay off Dad's mortgage. He said I would be the one to save the family. I felt a cold ache in my chest. That was the hook. It wasn't just greed. It was vanity. Natalie, the screw-up, the one who always needed help, wanted to be the savior. Caleb hadn't just promised her money. He had promised her redemption. He had promised her a reality where she was the responsible one and I was the one who was wrong. He played you, Nat, I said. He used your desire to be the hero against you. I didn't know, she wept. I swear, Tori, I didn't know it was a scam. I thought it was just business, high-risk business. I wanted to show you. I wanted to show Mom. Show us what? That I'm not useless, she whispered. She buried her face in her knees and howled. It was a raw, ugly sound. It was the sound of a child realizing there is no magic, only consequences. "Don't let Mom see me," she begged between sobs. "Please, don't let her look at me. She'll hate me." "She won't hate you," I said, though I wasn't sure if that was true. "But you have to talk to the police." "I can't," she said. "I can't go to jail." "If you cooperate, you are a victim," I said. "If you hide, you are an accomplice. Come on." I reached out my hand. She hesitated, then took it. Her palm was cold and clammy. I pulled her up. She leaned on me, heavy with grief. And for a moment, we were just sisters again, walking down a hallway, trying to survive the night. We went back to the ballroom. The police were taking statements. Elias Thorne had arrived. He was showing the officers the spreadsheet I had received, the one labeled System Transfer. "It confirms the timeline," Elias was saying as we approached. Midnight was the trigger for the automated sweep, but because Ms. Garcia froze the trust, and the father, Gordon, has now flagged the deed transfer as fraudulent under duress, we can put a hard stop on the receiving account. "So the house is safe?" I asked. "For tonight," Elias said. "We caught it in the buffer window. Crown Spire hasn't liquidated the title yet. It will be a legal mess to untangle. But yes, they didn't get the house." Gordon was sitting in a folding chair, a paramedic checking his blood pressure. He looked up when he saw Natalie. "Natty," he whispered. Natalie broke away from me and ran to him, falling to her knees and burying her face in his lap. Gordon stroked her hair, weeping silently. But my mother stood apart. Diane was standing near the exit, her arms crossed, her face a mask of stone. She wasn't looking at Natalie. She was looking at me. I walked over to her. "The house is safe, Mom," I said. "We stopped it." "You stopped the wedding," she said. Her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. "There was no wedding," I said. "There was a robbery. Caleb loved her," Diane said. "He was under pressure. If you had just given him the money, he could have fixed it. He told me. He said he just needed time." "He was lying to you, Mom." "You don't know that," she snapped. "You assume the worst because you are cynical. You drove him away. You scared him off with your microphone and your police." "I saved you," I said, my voice rising. "I saved you from being homeless." "You humiliated us," Diane hissed. She stepped closer, her perfume cloying and sweet. "Do you know what people are saying? They are saying the Garcia family is trash. They are saying we are criminals. You did that. Victoria, you aired our laundry." "I washed it," I said, "because nobody else would." "If you press charges," Diane said, her voice dropping to a lethal whisper, "if you testify against Natalie, if you make this a court case, you will kill this family. I will never speak to you again. I will make sure you are dead to us." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had raised me, who had taught me to tie my shoes, who had sat by my bed when I had the flu, and I realized that her love had a condition. The condition was silence. As long as I kept the secrets, as long as I funded the illusions, I was allowed to be her daughter. The moment I spoke the truth, the contract was void. "You are protecting a fantasy, Mom," I said, "and I am done paying for it." "Is that your choice?" she asked. "It is," I said. She stared at me for a long moment, then she turned her back on me and walked over to Natalie and Gordon, placing a hand on Natalie's shoulder, reclaiming her victim, reclaiming her narrative, leaving me standing alone in the middle of the empty dance floor. An hour later, I sat in a small office off the main lobby with Mara Wren and Elias Thorne. Mara had driven over as soon as I texted her. She was wearing a trench coat over her pajamas, her hair pulled back in a messy bun. "This is the statement," Mara said, sliding a paper across the desk. "It states that you, as trustee, identified the fraud, reported it, and took action to mitigate damages. It also states that you are fully cooperating with the investigation into Avery Finch events and Crown Spire Holdings." "Does it implicate Natalie?" I asked. It identifies her as the card holder, Mara said honestly. The police will decide if she was a co-conspirator or a pawn, based on what Elias found, the fake emails, the manipulated invoices. It looks like she was being directed, but Victoria, you have to sign this. If you don't, you leave yourself open to liability. You have to formally separate yourself from the scheme. I picked up the pen. I thought about Natalie sobbing in the hallway. I thought about my father's shaking hands. If I signed this, I was putting my sister in the line of fire. I was handing over the evidence that proved she had used the card, that she had lied about the balances. But if I didn't sign it, I was saying it was okay. I was saying that theft was acceptable as long as it was family. And I knew where that road ended. It ended with my father losing his home. It ended with me losing my license. It ended with Caleb winning. I looked at Mara. Silence is complicity, I said. Yes, she said. It is. I signed the paper. The scratch of the pen against the page sounded loud in the quiet room. It was the sound of a door closing. I handed it back to Mara. You did good, kid, Elias said, closing his folder. We verified the flight manifest. Caleb Mercer wasn't booked on a flight to Bali. He was booked on a flight to Caracas, leaving from the city airport at 1 a.m. tonight. Did you catch him? I asked. Not yet, Elias said. But he didn't get the money, and that means his friends at Crown Spire are going to be very unhappy with him. He has bigger problems than the police right now. I walked out of the Larkspur house just after midnight. The guests were gone. The caterers were packing up the trucks, tossing garbage bags full of uneaten lobster and wilting flowers into the back of a van. The Just Married sign had fallen off the gate and was lying in the mud. The air was cold, biting with the scent of salt spray and exhaust. I wrapped my jacket tighter around myself. I was exhausted. My bones ached. I wanted to go home, take a hot shower, and sleep for a week. I walked toward the overflow lot where my car was parked alone under a street lamp. My phone rang. I stopped. I pulled it out of my pocket. The screen glowed in the darkness. No caller ID. I stared at it. It could be the police again. It could be Mara. Or it could be him. I swiped answer. Hello? There was a silence on the line. Not a dead silence. A living silence. I could hear breathing. I could hear the background hum of an engine. Maybe a plane. Maybe a car. You are a very difficult woman, Victoria, a voice said. It wasn't Caleb. Caleb's voice was smooth, anxious, eager to please. This voice was heavy. It sounded like gravel tumbling inside a dryer. It was calm, detached, and utterly terrifying. Who is this? I asked. You stopped a transaction tonight, the man said. A very large transaction. We had a schedule. We had an agreement. The agreement was fraudulent, I said. And the police have the file. Police files are paper, the man said. Paper burns. Money is different. You cost us a lot of money. Victoria, $94,000, to be precise. Send the bill to Caleb, I said. My hand gripping the phone so tight it hurt. The man laughed. It was a dry, rasping sound. Mr. Mercer has been retired, the man said. But the debt remains. Debts always remain. You might think you won tonight because you kept the house, but you didn't win. You just bought a delay. Is that a threat? I asked. It is an accounting fact, the man said. We will be in touch. The line clicked dead. I stood there in the dark parking lot, the wind whipping my hair across my face. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Mr. Mercer has been retired. I didn't know if that meant he was fired, or if it meant something much, much worse. I didn't know if the man on the phone was a creditor, a gangster, or a ghost. I looked back at the Larkspur house. I could see my parents' silhouette in the window of the lobby. My mother was holding Natalie. My father was sitting with his head in his hands. They were safe for tonight. I had done my job. But the voice on the phone lingered in my ear. The debt remains. I realized then that the story wasn't over. I hadn't finished it. I had just started a new chapter, a darker chapter. I could have run back inside. I could have called the police back. I could have hidden in the light. But I didn't. I unlocked my car. I got in. I threw my bag on the passenger seat. I looked at my face in the rearview mirror. I looked tired. I looked older. But I didn't look scared anymore. I started the engine. "Let them come," I whispered to the empty car. I put it in drive and pulled out onto the highway, leaving the wedding, the lies, and my family behind me in the rearview mirror, driving straight into the dark. Thank you so much for listening to My Sister Texted Me, Don't Come to My Wedding, so I silently closed the bank accounts she was using. This was a heavy one, dealing with family betrayal, financial traps, and the hard choices we have to make to protect the people we love, even when they don't want to be saved. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. Are you listening from a rainy city like Merriwick or somewhere sunny? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this story and want more deep dives into family drama and sweet calculated revenge, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel. It really helps me keep writing these for you. And finally, I want to hear your thoughts. Did Victoria do the right thing by exposing the fraud at the wedding, or should she have found a quieter way to handle it? Would you have signed the statement against your own sister? Let's talk about it in the comments. Until next time, stay safe and watch your bank accounts.